Have you ever felt like your world was falling apart, or that you were facing a giant too big to overcome? The Bible is filled with incredible stories of people who faced impossible odds and found strength through their faith. These ancient tales aren't just history. They're powerful lessons for our lives today. Welcome to the Heart of Catholicism YouTube channel, the Catholic path to peace, where God's faith changes our lives. Today, we journey through the 5 most powerful stories in the Old Testament, exploring profound lessons of faith, courage, and redemption. Our journey begins at the very dawn of time, with the story of creation and the fall of man from the book of Genesis. This foundational narrative establishes the entire worldview of the Bible. God, the ultimate creator, brings forth everything from nothing light: land, stars, plants, animals, and finally, humanity. Humans are uniquely created in the image and likeness of God, which grants us inherent dignity, a divine purpose, and a deep moral responsibility. This account explains the breathtaking orderliness of the universe and establishes the intimate, personal connection God intended to have with His creation, especially with us. At the heart of this perfect creation was the Garden of Eden, a symbol of pure innocence, harmony, and divine order. In Eden, there was perfect peace between humanity and nature, a world without suffering, conflict, or death. Human freedom existed in beautiful balance, guided by loving divine boundaries. This idyllic state represents God's original intention for our existence. A life of complete harmony and unbroken communion with Him. It was a world where humanity walked with God in the cool of the day, free from the burdens of sin and shame that would later enter the world. However, this peace was shattered. The serpent, a cunning and deceptive creature, entered the garden, representing rebellion and spiritual warfare. The temptation it presented was a direct challenge to humanity's trust in God's goodness and His word. The serpent planted a seed of doubt, questioning God's motives and encouraging Eve to seek a wisdom apart from her Creator. Eve, succumbing to the allure of forbidden knowledge and the desire to be like God, ate the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Adam, who was with her, followed suit, and in that single act of disobedience, humanity fell. This event, known as the Fall, explains the origin of sin, suffering, and brokenness in our world. It marks the tragic shift from a state of innocence to one of moral struggle and spiritual separation from God. This separation becomes the central problem that the rest of Scripture seeks to resolve, setting the stage for the grand story of redemption. The story of the fall is rich with symbolism, teaching us about free will, the gravity of temptation, and our inherent responsibility for our choices. It shows how sin fractures our most important relationships, our relationship with God, with each other, and even within ourselves. As humanity multiplied, sin deepened its roots in the world. Our second story, Noah's Ark and the Great Flood, addresses a time when human corruption had reached a terrifying peak. Genesis describes a world consumed by widespread violence and a complete abandonment of God's principles. Humanity's heart had grown so wicked that every inclination of their thoughts was only evil all the time. This profound moral decay set the stage for a divine reset, a cleansing of the earth not out of blind anger, but out of a sorrowful justice. Yet, even in this judgment, God's mercy shone through. He chose to preserve creation and the future of humanity through one righteous man. That man was Noah. In a world spiraling into chaos, Noah stood apart as a symbol of obedience and unwavering faithfulness. He walked with God, and because of his righteousness, God entrusted him with a monumental task: to build an ark and save his family and pairs of every living creature from the coming flood. Noah's obedience, in the face of what must have been immense ridicule and disbelief from his neighbors, became the vessel for humanity's survival. He serves as a timeless model of faithfulness in the midst of a corrupt and faithless generation. The ark itself was a marvel of engineering and logistics, a testament to what can be achieved through divine instruction and human cooperation. Imagine the sheer scale of this project constructing a vessel large enough to house countless species, gathering the animals and stocking enough food for an unknown period. The ark was more than just a boat. It was a floating sanctuary, a symbol of salvation and refuge protected by God's own hand as the storms of judgment raged. When the floodwaters receded, God established a new covenant with Noah and all of creation. He set a rainbow in the clouds as a promise that he would never again destroy the earth with a flood. This vibrant arc in the sky symbolizes God's mercy triumphing over judgment, the renewal of creation, and his enduring faithfulness, even in the face of human failure. Generations later, God's people found themselves in a different kind of storm. Our third story, the Exodus, tells of Israel's liberation from Egyptian slavery. The book of Exodus opens with a scene of intense suffering. The Israelites, descendants of Abraham, had become a large population in Egypt and were forced into brutal slavery by a fearful Pharaoh. They endured harsh labor, oppression, and unimaginable injustice. Their cries of anguish rose to the heavens, and God heard them. This narrative builds a powerful emotional tension, setting the stage for one of the greatest deliverance stories ever told. Into this world of suffering, a leader was born, Moses. His life began with a miracle saved from Pharaoh's decree to kill all Hebrew baby boys by being placed in a basket on the Nile. He was raised in the very palace of the Pharaoh who oppressed his people. After fleeing Egypt for defending a Hebrew slave, Moses encountered God in a burning bush, a fire that burned but did not consume. It was there that God called him to a daunting mission: return to Egypt and lead the Israelites to freedom. Moses' confrontation with Pharaoh led to the 10 plagues, each a powerful demonstration of God's authority over the so-called gods of Egypt. From turning the Nile to blood to the final, devastating plague on the firstborn, these acts of divine justice were designed to break Pharaoh's hardened heart and compel him to let God's people go. The story reaches its cinematic climax at the shores of the Red Sea. Trapped between the charging Egyptian army and the impassable waters, the Israelites faced certain destruction. But in an awe-inspiring display of power, God parted the sea, allowing them to cross on dry land. When the Egyptian army pursued, the waters crashed down, securing Israel's freedom forever. This moment became the defining symbol of liberation, a testament to the themes of faith, perseverance, and divine justice. Sometimes the enemy isn't an entire army, but a single, terrifying foe. Our fourth story, David and Goliath, is the ultimate underdog tale. The Philistine army had gathered for war against Israel, and for 40 days, their champion, a giant named Goliath, taunted the Israelite soldiers, paralyzing them with fear. Goliath was a symbol of overwhelming intimidation and seemingly unbeatable power. Israel's army, including its king, cowered, their faith faltering in the face of such a fearsome opponent. But then a young shepherd boy named David arrived on the scene. He was not a soldier, but his heart was filled with a fiery faith. Hearing Goliath's blasphemous taunts against God, David was outraged. His confidence was not in armor or weapons, but in the Lord who had delivered him from the paw of the lion and the bear. He saw the battle not as a contest of human strength, but as a defense of God's honor. The iconic battle that followed was shockingly brief. Rejecting the king's heavy armor, David approached the giant with only his shepherd's staff, a sling, and 5 smooth stones. With a single, well-aimed shot, David struck Goliath in the forehead, and the giant fell. This incredible victory teaches a timeless lesson. True strength comes from faith and inner courage, not from physical power or worldly might. God empowers the unlikely and the underestimated to achieve extraordinary things. The story of David and Goliath has resonated through history, becoming a universal symbol of the triumph of the small and faithful against the large and arrogant. Our final story, Daniel in the lion's den, is a powerful lesson in maintaining faith under extreme persecution. Daniel was a man of immense integrity, serving with distinction in the foreign empire of Babylon. Though living in a pagan land, he remained fiercely devoted to God. His excellence earned him respect, but also stirred intense political jealousy among other officials. Driven by envy, these officials plotted against him. They manipulated King Darius into signing an irreversible decree. For 30 days, anyone who prayed to any god or man other than the king would be thrown into the lion's den. Daniel knew the law, but he refused to compromise his faith. He continued to pray to God 3 times a day, just as he had always done. As his enemies had planned, he was arrested and sentenced to death. Even the king, who was fond of Daniel, was powerless to save him. Thrown into a den of hungry lions, Daniel faced certain death. But God performed a miracle. He sent an angel to shut the mouths of the lions, and Daniel remained completely unharmed. This miraculous deliverance served as a powerful public testimony to the power and faithfulness of Daniel's God. The story of Daniel models for us how to stand firm under pressure, to choose faith over fear, and to trust God even when the outcome seems fatal. For believers today, Daniel is an inspiring example of courage in the face of injustice, workplace pressures, and any threat to our faith. So, what can we learn from these 5 powerful stories? They collectively emphasize timeless truths, the necessity of faith in adversity, the importance of moral courage, the reality of divine justice, and our own human responsibility. But above all, they weave a continuous thread of redemption and hope, showing that even from the depths of the fall, flood, slavery, fear, and persecution, God is always working to deliver and restore his people. These narratives are not just ancient myths. They form the spiritual and ethical bedrock of Judeo-Christian culture. They have profoundly shaped our understanding of good and evil, our literature, our laws, and our moral values. They continue to speak to the human condition with astonishing relevance. We encourage you to reflect on these stories. Which one resonates most with your personal journey right now? Are you facing a Goliath, a Red Sea, or a den of lions? Let these accounts of faith and courage inspire you, reminding you that the same God who delivered Noah, Moses, David, and Daniel is with you today.